Well, thank you for being here. Going to be a very interesting session, hopefully. As you know, Dr. Hoodboys has compiled yet another very important publication, and the OUP has printed it. This book comes at a point when both India and Pakistan have touted their nuclear prowess and have also cited that as a panacea for many, many things, from various strategic doctrines of achieving some kind of equality to the whole idea of generating power through nuclear technology. All of these issues are covered by this book, and needless to say, it shatters so many myths that we all have sort of imbibed through mainstream media, through politics, through jingoism, and through construction of nationalist discourses. We are very honored to have Dr. Hoodboy in this panel, the author and the editor of this volume. Plus we have Britta Petersen, who heads the German Heinrich Boll Foundation. It's based in Islamabad now, and of course, Madam Amina Saeed from OUP, Pakistan. Before I start this session, I'd like to make a point about the book, that the book is not just the compilation of some views and impressions by Pakistani scientists and commentators and experts, but it also entails commentaries from the other side of the border. So in a way, this is a unique publication because it brings together scientists from both India and Pakistan who have the courage and the integrity to state that the harmful effects of nuclear technology, as well as any potential nuclear configuration in the region, would be more than disastrous, not just for India and Pakistan, but perhaps for the world as well. With this, I would request Britta Petersen to make her opening remarks on the book, and thereafter we shall continue.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy and proud that we can present you this book today. Not only because every institution that has the privilege to work with Dr. Pervez Hoodboy can be proud. This book also has a history that I would like to share with you. Approximately 2 years ago, Heinrich Böll Foundation, which is the political foundation of the German Green Party, had some money to translate one of our publications called Nuclear Power, Myth and Reality into Urdu. It had been translated into other languages before, and I asked Pervez's advice which of the chapters would be relevant in the Pakistani context. He answered openly, as usually, "Frankly, I do not think that any of the chapters is relevant in Pakistan." Although I slightly disagreed, and we ended up translating some articles dealing with the problems of nuclear energy, this beautiful morning at his house at the Quaid-e-Azam University campus in Islamabad was the birth hour of a bigger project, this book. "Why don't you do a relevant book then?" I asked, and Pervez warmed up to the idea. In fact, this book has not only proven as relevant for Pakistan, but we are also going to present it in April in our headquarters in Berlin, and even before that, together with the Carnegie Endowment in Washington, and most probably also at the House of Lords in London. First, it was planned as a compilation of recent articles that were published earlier in scientific journals in order to make them available to the wider public. But the longer Pervez worked on it, the more he felt that he also needs to write new texts himself to respond to the current situation. The result of this process is the book that you can buy here. It is a unique effort by eminent scientists from Pakistan and India, such as A.H. Nair, Zia Mian, M.V. Ramana, and R. Rajaraman, to name just a few, to enlighten the public about everything that is at stake in nuclear South Asia. To quote from the introduction by Pervez Hoodboy, "The authors believe in a moral universe where human life is to be valued and its destruction en masse to be abhorred." The authors of this book, therefore, can be seen in a row with some of the most brilliant physicists who confronted nuclear weapons right from the beginning. While different groups of physicists in the US and Germany during World War II were busy developing the bomb, some people started thinking about its implications. Niels Bohr took a leading role concerned about an arms race. James Frank and Leo Szilard similarly warned about the danger of an arms race if the bomb was used in a surprise attack on Japan. Of course, this was all within a very secret world during World War II. But after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, scientists were freer to speak, and for a while they had a large audience. Robert Oppenheimer played the leading role among scientists in a proposal to put under international control dangerous nuclear facilities that could be used to make highly enriched uranium or separated plutonium, but the proposal failed. The next major issue was the decision to develop the H-bomb at the height of the Cold War. The US Atomic Energy Commission General Advisory Committee prepared a report that culminated in the statement, "The use of the H-bomb carries much further than the atomic bomb itself the policy of exterminating civilian populations." The US government's reaction to the report was not positive. In fact, it ended the career as a government advisor of Oppenheimer, who was the chairman of the committee. But there were other initiatives. The Russell-Einstein Manifesto from 1955 by philosopher Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein starts with the sentence, "In the tragic situation which confronts humanity, we feel that scientists should assemble in conference to appraise the perils that have arisen as a result of the development of weapons of mass destruction." They called on an East-West dialogue, and the Pagwaj movement, of which Pervez Utboy is a member, started such a dialogue inside the scientific community that continued on and off thereafter. In Germany, 18 nuclear physicists from the university town of Göttingen issued a declaration against the planned nuclear armament of the German Federal Army with atomic weapons in 1957. Among them, Nobel Prize winners Otto Hahn, Max von Laue, Max Born, and Werner Heisenberg, who had been one of the leaders of the German atomic energy project during the war. The declaration states, "We do not deny that the mutual fear of the hydrogen bombs represents today an essential contribution to the maintenance of peace in the world and of freedom in a part of the world. However, we consider in the long run this way to maintain peace and freedom as completely unreliable and the danger in the case of its failure as deadly." I may add here that the namesake of our own organization, Nobel laureate and writer Heinrich Böll, was part of this early anti-nuclear movement that finally led to Germany's exit from the use of nuclear power under the current government. The concern about the dangers of nuclear energy and the bomb also found artistic expression in one of the most important post-war dramas, The Physicists by Swiss writer Friedrich Dürrenmatt, that was first staged in Zurich in 1962. In this satiric play, 3 nuclear physicists have taken refuge in a home for the mentally ill in order to protect mankind from their discovery. Möbius, one of these characters, says in his last statement, "There are certain risks which one may not take. The destruction of humanity is one. Fame beckoned from the university, industry tempted me with money, both courses were too dangerous." We are lucky enough that scientists today do not need to hide. Many of them are brave enough to speak out in the West and in South Asia. Probably better than any politician, they know the implications that follow the unleashing of the atom. We should therefore listen carefully to them. I commend this book to everybody who is interested in a detailed, scientifically sound examination of the political, strategic, scientific, technical, religious, military, and humanitarian implications of nuclear South Asia. I would like to quote once again from Pervez Utboy's introduction. "If this book has succeeded in raising questions in the reader's mind and increased self-scrutiny, then it shall have served its purpose." I wish this book many readers. Thank you.
Thank you, Beta. And I would request Amina Syed to say a few words about the book before we talk to Dr. Hoodboy.
Thank you, Raza. I am delighted to have that Oxford University Press has published this important book, Confronting the Bomb, Indian and Pakistani Scientists Speak Out. Compiled by Parvez Hoodboy, this book comprises 7 essays, or essays written by 7 writers, most of whom are from India and Pakistan. And it is prefaced by a 1986 Nobel Prize winner, Charles Poliani from Canada. And I think the book is a great tribute to the maturity among Pakistani and Indian scientists who can rise above these chauvinistic tendencies to look at an issue with pragmatism and present it to the general reader in with all the implications, and let them know about the implications of using nuclear bombs. Dr. Parvez Hoodboy is well known in Pakistan for his promotion of science and his reformist interest in education. He's a strong supporter of nuclear energy for peaceful functions and an equally keen critic of nuclear proliferation for destructive purposes. Hoodboy is a Pakistani nuclear scientist with a PhD from MIT. He's a recipient of several awards, among which are the UNESCO Kalinga Prize of 2003 and the Abdus Salam Award in 1984. He has taught at the Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad and LUMS at Lahore. And he has recently been appointed as advisor to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on disarmament. I would like to thank Britta Peterson and the Heinrich Boll Foundation for collaborating with us on the publication and launch of this important and timely book. OUP and Heinrich Boll Foundation have worked together before on a writing competition among youth, which resulted in the publication of Voices and Visions, a collection of all the winning stories. And I hope that we can continue our collaboration. And I'm delighted to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that we published this book in November 2012, which was the 60th anniversary of OUP Pakistan in Pakistan, the establishment of OUP in Pakistan. And within 3 months, we sold out the first impression. So the book has been extremely popular. It has sold very well. And then we had to quickly reprint for this festival. So I'm delighted that the book is doing so well. Thank you.
Excellent. I think I would let Dr. Hoodboy say a few words about the book and its genesis, and then I would pose a few questions and then open the discussion for the participants so that we can have maximum interaction between the audience and the author/editor. So Dr. Hoodboy, over to you, just on the background and the genesis and the sort of purpose of this book. What are you trying to say?
Well, thank you, Rumi. Raza, if you would forgive me, you know, Brita and Amina have already spoken on the book. Let me tell people something more interesting. I just read that Dr. A.Q. Khan has joined the Jamaat-e-Islami. And he said कि अगर हमारे पास बम होता तो मशरक़ी पाकिस्तान हमसे कभी अलग हो नहीं सकता. To translate, if we had the bomb, East Pakistan would never have separated. So I've been scratching my head since that time, wondering how it would have all worked out. Because as you know, East Pakistan was 1,000 miles away from West Pakistan. The supply lines were impossible to maintain. The logistics was just beyond belief. And Pakistan would have been driven into total bankruptcy. So I scratched my head still further, wondering what this good doctor had in mind. Was he going to drop the bomb on the crowds in Dhaka who were protesting West Pakistani rule? Would he have dropped the bomb on Calcutta or on Delhi and had the favor returned to us here in Karachi and Lahore? I mean, what does this man have in mind? Unfortunately, it's not something that's totally uncommon in the Pakistani thinking, because lots of people think that the bomb gives security to Pakistan, and that if we didn't have the bomb, that India would swallow us up. This book is only tangentially addressing that question. It is, of course, a totally stupid idea that India would swallow us up, because, well, what would they do with swallowing up 200 million people when they can't even swallow up little Kashmir, which has got 10 million people? Okay, now I'll tell you something about the book. The reason I put this book together is that for 40 years, I've been passionately against the bomb. And the reason I am passionately against the bomb is because I learned from those teachers, from those professors at MIT, who had actually discovered the physical principles that led to the first atomic bomb. They are the people who you now read about in textbooks of physics. They're the people who discovered the basic fundamentals of nuclear power, of fission and of fusion. But once the bomb was dropped upon Hiroshima, several of them said, this is something that will destroy mankind. Robert Oppenheimer, after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, said, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. And those words have resonated with many scientists. I wouldn't say all. Some of them continue to work for the Department of Defense of the United States. They made more and more terrible bombs. People like Edward Teller went on and they created the Star Wars program. They were Ronald Reagan's right-hand men. But within the scientific community in the world, there has always been a strain of those scientists who feel their moral conscience challenged by what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In Pakistan and India, there too are not too many who believe in this, but there are still some. And over the last many years, they have written and spoken on the subject. I'm amongst them. And I thought it was time that we should now compile what they have talked about into a book that would be read on both sides of the divide, in India and in Pakistan. And what we've tried to do is present our views without hype, without unnecessarily stressing the destructive nature of nuclear weapons, but rather analyzing nuclear weapons, their development, their effects, their command and control in a scientific way. Because as scientists, we believe that facts must be presented as they are. So this is a compilation of 18 essays. 10 of them are mine, 8 others that have been written by Indians and Pakistanis. And it's there for you to look at, to read, to agree with or to disagree with. But I'm going to stop here and let Raza continue.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, I think you've laid out the argument rather clearly, but let me be the devil's advocate. I mean, Pakistan has been in an insecure state since 47. When the country was created, there were many in India who said this country won't survive, and it's going to be undone in a couple of years. So from the psychological point of view of an insecure state, and particularly when India has had, has a nuclear program since long, so would it not have been logical for the Pakistani state to pursue a nuclear program? I mean, can we sort of ignore that very real dimension of the Pakistani state's quest for survival?
Insecurity is a psychological state, and there is no cure other than going to a psychiatrist. In the case of India and Pakistan, we are reacting to each other. But India developed its nuclear weapons not with Pakistan in mind. It developed nuclear weapons with China in mind. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of the Indian program. This was 1948. Homi Bhabha, who was a very good scientist, He's mentioned in textbooks in physics for his work. He went to Jawaharlal Nehru and he said, it's time that India, as a great nation, explored nuclear energy. And Nehru bought into that. Now, this was a time when the Indian Atomic Energy Agency was made. This was a time when the motives, when the purposes of the of the Indian Atomic Energy Agency were being determined. Nehru was inclined towards peaceful uses. Bhabha said, let's keep it ambiguous. In 1962, after the India-China war, the decision was made to go nuclear. And that's when India went towards making the bomb. Well, 74 it tested. Pakistan started its nuclear program. Just 2 years earlier, 1972, this was the meeting in Multan with, called by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. And now we have the bomb. Okay, but the question of security or insecurity. Are we today more secure as a nation, more secure as a country than we were in, let's say, in the 1960s or 70s? The answer is for you to give, but I personally feel no.
That indeed is sadly is true. But the other argument, extended in favor of nuclear sort of bombs has been that they will generate power and solve the energy deficit in Pakistan. If you read the papers, if you read a lot of op-eds and speeches by political leaders for long, they've said that, and this book somehow, completely demolishes that argument. I think that's a very important aspect of the book, and I think the audience here needs to or should know a bit or a gist of that argument that you and your colleagues have extended.
Actually, I was quite amused by what Amina read out earlier. It said I was a very ardent supporter of the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Well, I'm not quite sure. I have very strong feelings on the bomb. I think it's terrible. On nuclear energy, I am ambivalent. In the case of India and Pakistan, my ambivalence disappears. In this case, in both India and Pakistan's cases, I believe that nuclear energy has delivered very little, and in the future will also deliver very little. Let me give you my reasons for that. Well, first of all, 50 years have passed since the establishment of the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission. 55, 60 years have passed since the establishment of the Indian Atomic Energy Agency. India produces something like 6% of its 6% of its total energy needs from nuclear power, which is peanuts. We produce 2%. And that's in spite of all that money, all those resources that we put into nuclear power. Look at the end of the day, what we have. We have that little toy in Hawke's Bay, the Canop reactor. It produces a miserable 70 megawatts of power. I mean, that's not enough to even run 3 big industries, or it's not even enough to run to light the houses in Golimar. Then we have 2 reactors in Chashma, supplied by China at an exorbitant rate. They're putting 2 more up there. They're not exactly toys, but they're only 330 megawatts each. Okay, that's the story for Pakistan. Story for India is not very different. But the thing that worries me most is what would happen in the case of a nuclear accident. We saw what happened at Fukushima. Fukushima, after the tsunami, has been in such a state of devastation and poses such a great threat to the people of Japan that they've closed down all the reactors in Japan, every single one of them. And Japan used to get 36% of its power, not 2%, 36% of its total power from nuclear. And the Japanese are shivering and shuddering at the thought of what might happen if Fukushima if a Fukushima type of accident happens again.
Thank you, Dr. Hoodboy. The other interesting chapter in the book pertains to the post-Bin Laden scenario, which is to me a very interesting chapter, as it sort of addresses both the paranoia within Pakistan, that the world is out to denuclearize us and somehow disempower us, and also the kind of concerns that are narrated in the global media about the dangers of having a nuclear Pakistan in a rather turmoil region full of turmoil. So I mean, I'd like you to say a few words on that sort of the current politics of the bomb.
Well, look, the world is afraid of Pakistan's bomb, and there's no doubt that the Americans, if they could, they would take all of Pakistan's bombs away. That's if they could. Now, they can't. First of all, let me tell you why they are worried. There have been attacks after attacks on military facilities in Pakistan. The GHQ, which is the heart of the Pakistan army, has also been successfully attacked. We had here the Mehran base. We've had very recently Kamra, before that Kohat. And so there's been example after example where the Pakistan Army, the Pakistan Air Force, and the Pakistan Navy have been infiltrated and attacked. So naturally, the question that comes into people's minds is, well, Pakistan has something like 100+ nuclear weapons. They're located in various different places. All right, never mind all the kind of high technology that's used to protect them. But ultimately, it's the people who matter. Now, what happens if you have some kind of a collusion between insiders and outsiders? The insiders and outsiders subscribing to the common philosophy of jihad or whatever. Is there then a danger that either a complete bomb gets hijacked or a sufficient amount of fissile material, which could be used to make a crude bomb, gets hijacked? That's the worry. I believe it is a worry that should be within us as well. So I have no doubt that the United States or the rest of the world would like to lay their hands on Pakistan's weapons and take them away. The question is, can they? And my answer is, only at the risk of starting a war that might become nuclear, and therefore, except under the most extreme circumstances, there is no chance of the US coming in and doing an Osama bin Laden type of operation and kidnapping all these nuclear weapons. There is very little chance, I would say, no chance, barring something totally extreme happening.
Thank you. But what about this scare of the jihadists taking the technology out or some bits of it and putting together a bomb? I mean, is that physically, scientifically possible for them to do? Do they have the sufficient technology at hand?
Once upon a time, the making of nuclear weapons was a very difficult task. It required the finest minds in the world. Now, if you have fissile material meaning the stuff that goes into the core of the bomb, it could be either highly enriched uranium or weapons-grade plutonium. Then the question of designing a bomb and of constructing an assembly which would cause that core to explode is not a very difficult problem. In fact, given, let's say, 90 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, enriched to, let's say, 90% or so, I could get a PhD student to work on the problem of making a crude nuclear bomb. And if he didn't solve that problem in 3 years, he wouldn't get his PhD. He'd be out. So it's not hard anymore, and I'll tell you what the basic mechanism is. Let's say that you have 90 kilograms of 90 or 95% highly enriched uranium. You take one block here, machine them to exactly the right sizes, dimensions, shapes. You have a stainless steel rod, such as you would find, let's say, inside a howitzer or a good artillery gun. And then you have an explosive here, and you ram the two into each other. It won't work very well. It is very wasteful in terms of the material used, but it's enough to destroy a city.
Wow. So before we open up the discussion, I mean, I also want to, would like you to elaborate a little, as you say in the book, and your Indian colleagues also say, the kind of effects of the nuclear war, if God forbid that breaks out between India and Pakistan, and the details of the so-called nuclear winter that you have very diligently detailed in the book. So I'd like to you to say that to the audience. I mean,
well, let's say that a nuclear bomb was to drop on Beach Luxury Hotel right now. I tell you, we'd be very lucky, because we wouldn't know what happened. We would be evaporated into atoms and molecules. But the people in, let's say, near Empress Market or further away, Landi, they will be the unlucky ones, because the ones, let me talk about the ones in Landi. They're the ones who will receive radiation. And that radiation will cause them to die slow, painful deaths, which will be over days, weeks, months. We will be the lucky ones. 100 nuclear weapons exist in Pakistan's arsenal, 100 nuclear weapons in India's arsenal. Today, if one bomb is dropped on a city, the effect of that bomb is going to be considerably greater than the bomb which was dropped on Hiroshima, though they be of the same size. The reason is, there are two reasons. One is population densities are higher, and the other thing is that cities have more and more plastic materials in them. And plastics, as you know, burn. So it's the fire that would be enormously devastating. In Hiroshima, 200,000 people died, well, 150 and then followed by 50 through over a long time. That same bomb dropped in on Bombay or on Karachi would lead to 500,000. That one bomb. So multiply the effects by 100.
okay, thank you, and somber thought. We shall now get some questions and answers from the audience and some comments. I request that you please keep your questions very short because of the paucity of time. And if you have an observation, make it very, very brief. Naqvi Saab, I'll ask you to start, please. Mike.
Thank you, Raja. I didn't mean to start because I merely wish to make a comment. But since I have the mic, I'll go ahead and do it. Professor Hoodboy's book is a very good addition to the literature on nuclear programs and nuclear weapons. And I had the opportunity and the pleasure to be at the Islamabad book launch also. And I will mean to say, give only one general comment. What troubles me about this book is that it tends to scapegoat Pakistan. I mean, it is about South Asia. It is about India and Pakistan. But there are only 3 essays by the Indians, and the scathing criticism about Pakistan's nuclear program is exclusively meted out to Pakistan. Actually, India's program, and I, at the risk of sounding the Pakistani advocate or proponent, the problem of nuclear weapons in this region started with India. And Pakistan, for many, many years, for example, has sponsored a resolution in the United Nations for a nuclear weapon-free zone in South Asia. So this is stopped in 97, because in 98 May we had the nuclear tests. So from 97 onwards, there was a qualitative change in the whole situation. So we have been advocates of non-proliferation. We have always wanted to be supporting nuclear weapon-free zone, and yet we had to do all that we have done. So to me, the problem lies with India, not with Pakistan.
Okay,
Thank you.
Let's collect three and then you respond. So the gentleman in white, आपके पीछे जो हैं, sorry.
Well, one of the consequences of the bomb in the 70s when they were thinking to do it, and Benazir was still a young lady, I had asked her that won't the bomb strengthen the military junta and they will create problems. Ultimately, the bomb has led to give confidence that there will be no war with India and they can have all the jihadi groups, and hence the jihadi problems in Pakistan. What do you have to say about it, Dr. Woodboy?
Thank you, Raza. I thought I raised my hand in time. But my question is follow-up from there. Now, pacifists, as we all are, we agree with your theory of no bomb, but since we have it with us, some of us tend to think that has it been a deterrent on India's part to be have restraints on occasions like Kargil and others? And also that now that we have it, what should be done with it? Like, we live with it, and is there any positive, thing that can come out as a nation from having it, Mr. Hoodboy?
As far as the comment on India goes, well, look, at the very outset of my essay and at the outset of Zia Mia's essay, there is absolute total focus upon India. India started the arms race on the subcontinent, and this book does not in any way exempt India from its responsibility. So I hear what you say, but I cannot quite agree with it. What should Pakistan do? What should India do now that the bomb exists? Well, for heaven's sakes, stop making more. Even if it is not possible to get rid of all nuclear weapons tomorrow, at the very least, we can stop the production of fissile materials. Fissile materials, the stuff that goes into making more bombs. Unfortunately, Pakistan, at the Conference of Disarmament in Geneva, has not allowed discussion on this subject to proceed. And in 2013, that is just last month, in fact, Munir Akram said that Pakistan will proceed to do whatever it has been doing, and it does not agree to a cut-off of fissile material production. I frankly think that this is a very bad thing that we are doing. The relationship with jihadist groups, well, it's a fact that Kargil would not have happened but for the nuclear weapons that Pakistan tested. This is ringing. भाई उधर से टेस्ट इसको ठीक करें उधर से. Pakistan, because it had nuclear weapons, it was able to provide a nuclear umbrella to the Northern Light Infantry, which went across and attacked Indian troops in Kargil. And I think that groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba would not exist in Pakistan but for the fact that they have been provided nuclear protection by the state. Of course, the downside of that we are witnessing today, because a lot of these groups have gotten out of control. The ISI and the Pakistan military no longer exercises that kind of control that it once had, and today we are witnessing ISI control centers, their headquarters attacked and blown up, and they have been blown up in 3 cities, in Multan, Faisalabad and Peshawar.
Next 3, yeah.
Thank you. Dr.
Keep it very brief, please.
I'll try to be very brief. Dr. Hooper, I remember reading an article by Carl Sagan, When Scientists Know Sin. I think in Pakistan, India, not many scientists know sin of nuclear weapons. The one thing I wanted to ask is that when they exploded the bomb, one of the rationale was that, okay, now the defense budget will go down because we have the deterrence. But I think both the nuclear and the defense budget has just gone higher and higher. And up to now, no one has been able to tell me what is the nuclear budget, what is the budget, how much are we spending on this? I mean, it's never been clear. Can you tell us?
Okay.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Raza Saab. I have a question, sir, and I'm a great fan of disarmament, by the way. But the question that I want to ask, I was saying that I favor disarmament. It's an excellent ideal that must be met. But let's try and understand what Pakistan's position is. You were just mentioning about Ambassador in the New York, Ambassador Akram. He refused negotiations in conference on disarmament. But my understanding, I'm a student of strategic and nuclear studies, my understanding is that Pakistan says that we want to sign a fissile material treaty which takes all fissile material that has been taken in, produced to date into account, whereas the proposed FMCT says we cut off where the fissile material is and we do not go for complete disarmament. So I think that's a fair position that Pakistan has. They should, first of all, define the scope and then start the negotiation. Thanks.
Piche, the young man in blue, so he's been raising his hand for quite some time.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Samir Ali Khan. I'm a student of international relations, and I need to ask you one question. You mentioned, you recently said that Pakistan and India went close to nuclear confrontation 5 times. You mentioned 1988, 1990, then 1999, 2001, 2, and then 2008. But recently in an interview, General Pervez Musharraf and Indian Foreign Minister on a TV interview said that the nuclear weapons did not come into play in 1999 Kargil war. So how do you justify your claim that nuclear weapons, Pakistan and India were close to using nuclear weapons in 1988 and then 1990? Thank you.
Good questions, all of them. Budget, I don't know. They never tell us how much they spend on nuclear weapons. The first nuclear weapon, the first nuclear weapon that Pakistan developed, the whole program rather, was funded by maybe Libya and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. We don't know by how much, but they definitely did send lots of money. From what one hears, and I have no proof of this, of course, they had suitcases stuffed with dollars put on PIA planes and brought into Pakistan. Then there was the money for the 1974 earthquake, which disappeared and which people say was used for the nuclear program. All said and done, there is no accounting that has been done which is known to anyone except maybe a very few people. And among those very few people was H.U. Beg, who died, and Ghulam Isa Khan, who died. So I don't know, but people have made a rough estimate of something like $2 billion a year for the nuclear program. As I say, those are just back of the envelope calculations. The issue with the fissile material cutoff treaty in Geneva, as you said, sir, is that Pakistan is insisting that existing fissile material stocks be taken care of, be accounted for. Unfortunately, this is the kind of demand which is used to derail talks, because it is impossible to find out how much fissile material has been produced by China, by Pakistan, by India, by Israel. It just can't be done because states can hide that. Let's say that you've produced fissile materials and you go and you bury it somewhere. How on earth is anyone going to know, except for those very few people who were involved with it? And so this is an excuse that Pakistan is using to derail the FMCT talks, in my opinion. On the question of whether nuclear weapons were actually readied for use at the time of Kargil or not, you and I cannot know. But Bruce Riedel, this is the story told by him. He was in the room with Bill Clinton and with Nawaz Sharif. And Riedel says that when Clinton told Nawaz Sharif that your nuclear weapons are being readied for use, do you know that your missiles have now been deployed? Nawaz Sharif said no. Then Clinton showed him proof, whatever that was. And that's the time when Nawaz Sharif decided to pull back from Kargil. You and I, again, don't have proof, but let's ask ourselves the question. Since India and Pakistan both have nuclear weapons, and since they have had serious crises, is it not logical that they would have prepared their nuclear weapons for use, even if they didn't display them? If a military doesn't do that in a time of crisis, then to my mind it makes absolutely no sense. It has spent so many resources in acquiring those nuclear weapons, years and years of development, and then when war is around the counter, they decide, oh, we're not going to even prepare them. I don't think that makes sense.
Right. I ask. Please give it to the lady here in the second row, and then you, and then Ambassador Kazi.
Mr. Hooper, you said that Pakistan was giving protection, nuclear protection to the jihadi groups. That frightening statement. Is it true?
Okay. That's a question.
Yeah. And then, okay, Kanak at the end. Can you take the mic, please, over there? Fifth row, the back.
Let me deploy a Kathmandu perspective on Islamabad and New Delhi. The moment Shagai and Pokhran 2 happened, all the nuclear doves in those two cities became nuclear hawks overnight. That was an interesting perspective to see from, let's say, from a Kathmandu perspective. It was interesting. But my question is this. The reason we are not able to generate an anti-nuclear weapon campaign, it seems to me, is that we have not been able to penetrate the vernacular. Until and unless you penetrate the vernacular to impact the politics of each of the countries of South Asia, we're talking about India and Pakistan, it is impossible to impact the politicians. So what should have happened is a strong anti-nuclear weapon movement in Saraiki, if you will, in Punjabi, in Sindhi, in Bangla, in Urdu, in Hindi, in Tamil. And I'd like to ask Pervez this question. Where are we on the vernacularization, if that's the right term, of the anti-nuclear weapons agenda?
And can you take the mic over there on the other side? Run. To Ambassador Kazi there he is, raising his hand.
Thank you very much. I think there was a reference to A.Q. Khan and East Pakistan, And what that highlighted was the deep irrationality that does exist, maybe, which exists within the vernacular, as you said. Now, I would suggest that that irrationality is much more deeply rooted in human behavior altogether. Because you look at the United States, for instance, not only what it did in Japan, but even now, with reference to no first use, it refuses to adhere to that, even though the consequences of that mean ongoing instability and possible escalation to a situation where these things can become a problem. Right now, the United States and much of the Western world are concentrated on the so-called Iranian threat, nuclear threat. There is a simple way out of this, a Middle East nuclear weapons-free zone, which the US and Israel are absolutely determined for it never to come into being. Were it to come into being, that would automatically take care of the Iranian nuclear threat, since it has already accepted the idea, along with others. So we have a problem of irrationality here, which is not just confined to us developing countries, but it's all over. And here I'd like to finally just talk about what Stephen Hawking said. Stephen Hawking talked about the need, in order to ensure the survival of the human race, for a significant number of people to relocate somewhere outside the world as it exists elsewhere in the solar system, and a minimum number of people so that they could breed on, because otherwise, if you don't leave the world, sooner or later, the probabilities of an accident actually taking place, considering the record and the near mistakes and errors, will happen. And Noam Chomsky mentioned that the human being, the Homo sapiens sapiens, is probably an evolutionary error, because he's the only species which is likely to commit species suicide way before the normal end of the natural lifetime of species. Given all of this, is there any room for optimism?
Okay. First, the question about, do nuclear weapons provide protection to jihadist groups? To my mind, it's fairly obvious that India, being a much larger power than Pakistan, it would not tolerate militant training camps, which certainly exist. I mean, we have abundant proof of that, unless Pakistan had some means by which to counter an Indian incursion into its territory. Just to recount an episode, 2008, when the Mumbai attack took place, General Hamid Nawaz and I were on television together. And the anchor asked General Hamid, he said, who's done this? Ye kisne kiya? So Hamid Nawaz says, ये तो इंडियंस ने खुद किया होगा, अगर उन्होंने नहीं किया तो फिर अमेरिकनों ने किया, और अगर अमेरिकन नहीं तो इसराइलियों ने किया. Okay, so then he asked the anchor, so then the anchor asked him, then what do you propose if India brings its tanks into Pakistan? And he says, let's nuke India even before they can approach the border. Here is the Lashkar-e-Taiba, based in Muridke, which carried out the attacks. We have abundant evidence that Pakistani intelligence was involved in the attack in Mumbai. And yet, what could India do? It frothed and fumed and then pulled back wisely, because they lost 200 people there. They would have lost 20 million if there had been a nuclear war. Kanak, your question about the vernacular. भाई हम उर्दू में भी बात करते हैं, उन आवाम को उन्हीं की ज़बान में समझाने की कोशिश करते हैं और पहुंचते भी हैं, और ये ज़्यादा मौसर तरीक़ा है और ज़्यादा होना चाहिए. लेकिन देखें, एक वक्त के बाद ऐसे होता है कि जो अरबाब इख्तियार है वो हमारे मुंह को बंद कर देते हैं, टेलीविज़न पर से हटा देते हैं. तो अब ये हामिद नवाज़ वाला वाक़या जो मैंने आपको सुनाया, उसके कुछ वक्त तक फिर भी मुझे बुलाया करते थे, अब तो बुलाते ही नहीं हैं. So yes, I agree with you, but then you see there are larger issues involved over here. They know that if you speak in English, if you write in English, it's got a limited effect. You go on Geo, you go on the Urdu channels, then it's a much harder, it's a much bigger effect, and now they've made it difficult. And the third question was?
Was Ambassador Qazi saying,
Yes, yes. Is there a chance for humans to survive? The United States is a part of the problem. Today it is pretending to be part of the solution. But the facts are before us. Not only did it use make the first nuclear weapon, use it, but also had at the peak something like 35,000 nuclear weapons in its arsenal. Today it is threatening Iran, but is quiet on Israel. This is being totally partisan. I completely agree with you on that. But should we be pessimistic about the future of the human race? Well, I don't know, but I think that there are indications that humans as a whole are improving. I refer you to Steven Pinker's book, Angels of, I forget the name, but what Pinker has done is documented violence over the last 5,000 years and shown using archaeological data and actually facts that less people are being killed per thousand of the population today as compared to earlier centuries. So that's cause for optimism. Humans are growing slightly smarter, but their technology is growing much too fast. But look, we have no choice but to be hopeful and optimistic.
We'll have to close this session because I've been reminded that the room has to be vacated for the next incoming session. I'm really sorry. Those of you who have questions can ask Dr. Hudboy. I thank Dr. Hudboy, Amina Hayed, and Rita Petersen for being here. And at the end, I'd like to say that this is a book that you must get. It's outside available. And those who are interested in reading more of these arguments can take a look. I mean, it is a matter of courage to oppose or even critique bombs in Pakistan, because if you do so, you are labeled as a traitor. And I think these are some handful brave men and women who have worked together to put this publication out in the open for the public. Thank you very much again.